Well, good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Richard Cruz, and joining us today is the Warrant Officer of the Royal Australian Air Force, Robert Swanwick. We're honoured to acknowledge Air Marshal Leo Davies, Chief of Air Force Australia, and Mrs Rhonda Davies. Air Vice Marshal Gavin Turnbull, Deputy Chief of Air Force Australia. Air Commander Australia, Air Vice Marshal Stephen Robertson, and the accompanying international delegation of the Air Power Conference 2018. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial. Could I ask you to please stand and join in singing the National Anthem? Please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's first World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would be a place to help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Flight Sergeant Llewellyn William Grant. Born in the Melbourne suburb of Clifton Hill on the 22nd of November 1920, Llewellyn William Grant was the son of Dudley and Frances Grant. Before he enlisted in the Royal Australian Air Force on the 16th of July 1943, Grant had worked as a machinist. After enlisting, he trained as a navigator before embarking for overseas service. As part of the Empire Air Training Scheme, he was one of almost 27,500 RAAF pilots, navigators, wireless operators, gunners and engineers who, throughout the course of the war, joined Royal Air Force squadrons or Australian squadrons based in Britain. After his arrival in Britain, Grant undertook further specialist training before he was posted to number 460 Squadron, Royal Australian Air Force. Number 460 Squadron would become the most highly decorated Australian squadron in Bomber Command, and the squadron that suffered the highest casualties. Flying twin-engined Vickers Wellington medium bombers and then the 4-engined Avro Lancaster heavy bomber, the squadron lost over 1,000 men, Australian, British, Canadians, New Zealanders and South Africans. Almost 600 Australians from 460 Squadron are listed here on the Roll of Honour. On the morning of the 19th of March 1945, 22 Lancasters from 460 Squadron took part in a raid on Hanau, Germany. As they were returning from the mission, low cloud covered reduced visibility over the home airfields of the Bomber Command squadrons in Lincolnshire, England. The Lancaster, in which Grant was navigator, was being homed to RAF Kelstern Airfield, only a few kilometres from 460 Squadron's home at Binbrook, when it crashed into high ground while making its approach toward the runway. Grant and all 6 of his fellow Australian and British crewmates were killed. They were Australians: Pilot Officer Geoffrey Brown, Warrant Officer George McBride, Flight Sergeant Jack Stacey, Warrant Officer Alexander Moss, Flight Sergeant Rex Shoddy, and British Airman Sergeant Jack David. Llewellyn Grant was 24 years old. The bodies of the Australian members of the crew were recovered from the crash and are buried side by side in the RAF plot at Cambridge City Cemetery. Grant's name is listed here on the Roll of Honour on my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. A photograph of his headstone is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Flight Sergeant Llewellyn William Grant, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes this evening's Last Post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.